Hello, I hope you are well, and this is the unofficial audio commentary for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. You see the Universal logo there. I'm Omar Moore, a film critic here in San Francisco, California, and as I record this, it is the month of July. I'm not going to tell you what year. That's the title, Do the Right Thing. And you're hearing the music. You just heard the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, which was composed by James Weldon Johnson. He wrote it. And you see here a woman in red dancing energetically to Public Enemy's Fight the Power. And all that color that you see there, it's this golden hued, kind of feels very Afrocentric. And in fact, it is, harkening back to the days of the great dynasties in Egypt. This is Rosie Perez. She is a choreographer, an actor, producer, and she continues to dance. She did this sequence for a number of hours. I think it was something like 8 consecutive hours at night. You see the credits here, and I love the way that these credits come across the screen and the metaphor of fighting the power. Rosie Perez's energetic opening here. I love the energy of this. And again, you notice that golden brown hue. It's kind of like hieroglyphs in terms of the way the tone of that golden brown background is. Very much so. I just love the pulse, the atmosphere already of this sequence. And it's a very good title sequence. It's excellent. Spike Lee has already riveted us here with the way that the opening credits are unfolding. This is an excellent performance by Rosie Perez. And there she is. Her title comes up there. It's just excellent what she's doing here. This is a lot of energy, a lot of precision, a lot of skill and artistry. And to do this for 8 consecutive hours, I think that she should get some kind of accolade for that alone, I think. And I mean that in the most sincere and most non-patronizing way possible. Do the Right Thing was shot over an 8.5-week period in 1988 on one block in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. The whole film takes place on that one block during the course of one single day in the summer. I just love the way that Public Enemy here talk about who we are supposed to cast as heroes in the United States. And they talk about Elvis and John Wayne in the song Fight the Power. And the reality is that both Elvis and John Wayne were stone cold racists who really did not care at all about black people. Elvis made some racist comments to the effect of, the only thing that black people can do for me is shine my shoes. And the thing is that racist comments like that and racist people like Elvis don't even care to realize that they got their music and their style from black people. They got everything about their success from black people, black folk who were the architects of music, the African American sound. Black folk cultivated the sound of this country. And you've got a white man talking a lot of racist BS. And there is the director, and here is Samuel L. Jackson. And the trademark "wake up" that Spike Lee puts in pretty much every single film that he has done. Samuel L. Jackson, at this point, had been in his second consecutive Spike Lee joint. Previously, he had been in School Days up to this point, and that was his first movie with Spike. And then, as I say, right after School Days came Do the Right Thing, and here he is as Mr. Senior Love Daddy. we're getting a sense of this musical rhythm. In the background, you see Public Enemy on the poster there in the background. And this is a DJ studio. And you see how the camera pulls out. And you see all these musical people, Keith Sweat, Whitney Houston, Public Enemy. And you begin to get a sense of what and who this radio station caters to. Obviously, it caters to, I think that may be, I don't know who that is there, the woman there in the background. Forgive me, I don't remember her name there in the on the poster. But as we track out, we get a sense of what the music and who the music caters to. And this is part of the musical tradition, the black musical tradition that's being given to us. We have a look down the block of this neighborhood, and we know that it's really hot because we can tell Ossie Davis lying there on that bed, and you see all the light coming through, kind of diffused light. Ernest Dickerson is your cinematographer, and he did an excellent job of giving us what heat looks like and how it feels. And he's done a number of films with Spike Lee, of course, as a cinematographer. He himself is a director, and you see Ossie Davis here, one of the titans of black cinema. Really, he's no longer with us. He is someone who made a large impact on film and also off the camera too, with his activism. This is Roger Smith playing Smiley, a character who has a stutter. I think it's very ironic here that he talks about Malcolm X and Dr. King, whom you see there in that photo. And Dr. King and Malcolm X were two of the greatest orators of the 20th century. And I think there's something ironic and interesting about having someone who has a stutter proclaim two of the most powerful and resonant orators in the history of the world, certainly in the history of the 20th century. I think there's a very interesting dynamic there. And what we'll see throughout this film is that you have characters who are very much dual. There are these two sides to every character. There are these two things going on at any given time. So there's all these natural oppositions or natural coexistences that become very strained throughout this very hot day. Now you see Spike Lee there and Joie Lee. They are brother and sister in real life. And they play brother and sister in this film. This is one of the first funny moments from Do the Right Thing. You see the two of them there, and it's very natural. The chemistry is natural because they are real life siblings, but also because I think relationships like those can also help make the acting, I think, a lot more comfortable. Spike Lee and Joie Lee here are really funny. And you get the first laugh here because then you see that Spike Lee says it's your upper lip, your breath stinks, your and that's the first laugh that the audience has in this film. You see here now Danny Aiello in the white car. I don't know what car make that is. Is it a Cadillac? I have no idea. I'm not really great on finding deciphering cars. But you see the neighborhood there, Bed-Stuy Do or Die, that mural. I don't know if that mural is still there now. But you see the white characters. These are the three main white characters that you'll see. John Turturro dressed in black there as Pino. And you see Richard Edson, who is in the blue vest or tank top there, dark blue, navy blue. Danny Aiello is there in the Hawaiian shirt, or the cactus shirt, and wearing white pants. And you've got these three characters, this triangulation of these characters. And we already know that Pino hates this neighborhood. We know that Danny Aiello, who plays Sal here, is telling him to get a broom and sweep out front, and he's refusing to do that, and he's telling his younger brother to do it. And there he is, Richard Edson playing Vito. So John Turturro and you see him here in black doing a really good job playing Pino. He was one of the, I think, standouts in the film. I mean, all the cast members were. But I love this line here: "Get a broom, sweep up," and then you've got Vito saying, "Are you deaf or what? Pop asked you." And then a very prophetic line here. Sal says, "I'm gonna kill somebody today." If you've seen Do the Right Thing already, and I hope that you have when you're listening to this, you will know that that line carries a lot of prophecy in it. There's Spike again playing Mookie in his Jackie Robinson shirt for the Brooklyn Dodgers. The neighborhood bustles with life. And there's Ruby Dee, another titan of cinema, black cinema as well. She plays Mother Sister, and she also is a spouse, the spouse of Ossie Davis. I met both Ossie Davis and Ruby Dee in Harlem many years ago, and they couldn't have been any nicer or kinder to me. Absolutely lovely couple, and both of them sadly are no longer with us. So we're beginning to get a feel of this neighborhood now. We see Sal, we see Mookie come in, and Vito and Pino. And again, the contempt that Pino has for people who do not look like he does. And so here's a black character coming in, and you already see the hostility of the white Italian male character that John Turturro plays so well here. And here comes Ossie Davis, who already has been sweating from this hot summer's day in Brooklyn, New York. I love the tone again here. You see the sepia tone, kind of this mustardy slash golden slash. It's really well done by Ernest Dickerson. Do the Right Thing was released on June the 30th, 1989, and the critics were overwhelmingly kind to it. There were some white film critics who were very hostile to it, only one or two of them, but most others, and most other film critics, black, white, otherwise, were very good to this film in terms of the excellent critical reception that it got. They were very admiring, I would say. I thought this film was an excellent film. I think it's an excellent film as well. And many people would say it's still Spike Lee's best. But there was one film critic, Joe Klein, who wrote in one of the July editions, forget which one, it might have been July 2nd of 1989, in the New York Magazine, a column called Spiked, and Spiked question mark. And in that piece, he writes that Do the Right Thing may cause black people to riot in the theaters, and so white people should not go and see it. Yeah, he honestly said that. I kid you not. And I'm quoting him almost verbatim. He literally said that Do the Right Thing is a film that white people should steer clear of at the theaters because black people are going to riot. They may riot. Yeah, he said that. The only thing that happened in 1989 was that Yusuf Hawkins was murdered by a group of 32 white men in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. That's what happened just 2 months after this film was released. Also, of course, we know that before this film was released, there was the Central Park attack on a jogger there, a white female jogger. You just saw Radio Raheem with his boombox. Of course, Radio Raheem, played by Bill Nunn. He'll be a central character, of course, in this film. I'll talk a bit more about him later. But here's Ossie Davis now inside the Korean grocery store. And that was a central thing back then because in New York, there had been a number of incidents a year after this film was released where Korean grocers and black customers had been in altercations. There was one particularly in Brooklyn that I remember very, very clearly. It wasn't very far away at all from where I was. And there was a black woman from Haiti who had been attacked by and slapped in the face and punched by a Korean grocer. I think it was a male Korean grocer. And there was a boycott of that grocery store for a number of months in New York City. Of course, in Los Angeles in 1991, there was the murder of Latasha Hollins, a 15-year-old black girl who had put an item on a counter, put her book bag on the counter, walked out of the store. And as she was walking out the store, the Korean grocer, female, from behind the counter, pulled out a gun and shot her in the back of the head, killing her instantly. And she was sentenced to no time in prison. The judge said that the Korean grocer, Kim Da-ju, had suffered enough. See, the tension here now between Rosie Perez's character, Tina, there, and Tina's mother. They're arguing and shouting at each other. And you see again the dynamic, mother and daughter. And sometimes those relationships can be very fraught. And you see the child there that Tina has. We don't yet know who, I guess we suspect, we don't yet know who the father is, although it will become very clear very soon. We begin to see more characters, and again, this is the Greek chorus, I call them, of a trio of black men on a corner. I love the fact that they're up against a wall there because there's something symbolic about that. And their plight, is red brick up against the wall. You see those windows with the bars in them. It's kind of like a jail cell. And I think the point here is that these are men who really could have become somebody in their lives, and they got beat down by the oppression and the systemic and institutionalized racism. And they are three casualties of it. And so their power, I think, is to be on the street corner commenting about life, observing life, and joking about life to keep themselves from crying. And they're now talking here about, being able to open up businesses in their neighborhood. And they're very funny, all of them. Paul Benjamin, Robin Harris in the middle there, and on the right-hand side, Frankie Faison. And all three of them are very funny. Unfortunately, Paul Benjamin and Robin Harris, the two on the left and in the center there, are no longer with us at this point of this in time. And, they were very funny here. And I think, again, the Spike Lee puts them up against this red brick wall, not only to illustrate the heat, but also kind of, I think, the lifeblood of these three men. They could have become someone consequential. And I don't think that they became that based on what I see here. And another character. This is Giancarlo Esposito playing Bugging Out. And on the left is Danny Aiello as Sal. And they are inside of Sal's famous pizzeria. And Bugging Out's complaining about the cheese. Where's the cheese on this thing, on this pizza slice? And Sal wants $2 more for extra cheese. And it's like, my goodness, this is so cheap. And you see, so cheap in the way that Sal is charging all these prices for extra cheese. And then he barely puts some cheese on there. And Bugging Out castigates Sal for being cheap. And you see all of the black residents inside the pizzeria. And now we see all the white Italians on the wall of fame inside of Sal's famous. Robert De Niro, Al Pacino among them. That might be Jimmy Durante there, I'm not sure. And this bothers Bugging Out. Why the hell are there all these white people on the wall and no black people on the wall? And I think that Danny Aiello's character, Sal, has a point here. You can put up your cousins and uncles and nieces and nephews and your whole family on the wall when you get a business of your own. And I think he's got a point there. He has a right to do that if he chooses. Now, to I think some people, it's very insensitive to have all these white people on your wall in a black neighborhood. But it is his business and he has the prerogative to do that if he wishes. I think there's a good argument also from Bugging Out, who's just said, look, black folk are the only people that walk in here and spend money. And so you should be putting black folk up there. I don't think that's a terrible argument at all. Here's an echo from Howard Beach in New York City in Queens. A baseball bat comes out there from Sal. And if you remember in 1986 in Queens, in a place called Howard Beach, there was a pizzeria called the New Park Pizzeria. And that was outside that happened a violent racist attack on 3 black men by 25 white men. And they were using baseball bats and they beat these 3 men severely. One of them to escape, they ran away to escape, and one of them ran into oncoming traffic and was killed. His name was Michael Griffith. So Spike Lee is using the symbolisms of some real life events in this fictional film. And we all know that, certainly if you've seen this film, what you see in it happens in real life. So there is this infusion of real life into a fictional film. So there's very little escape from the events because we know that they have happened and are continuing to happen. I love this in the background here with Bugging Out. Look at him in the distance mimicking Sal with his arm gestures. Yeah, you see it again there. He's mimicking him in the background, is mimicking Sal. I love that. Sal has just tossed Bugging out of the pizzeria, of course, there, and you see all these people, and Bugging Out has told these black persons in the diner to boycott Sal's Famous, and they're kind of just looking at him, wondering like, what's going on with this guy. But I think the theme is that in terms of business, black folk we should be getting our own businesses. We should be. And I know that we face obstacles, but we have to keep pushing forward. There are lots of black businesses in this country, and I think we need to continue to support black businesses. I think that's something that gets said here in a roundabout way by 1 or 2 characters. Ossie Davis has just given Spike Lee's character some advice about always doing the right thing. And we see Smiley and Mookie here on the steps. And Smiley pesters Mookie to buy this photo of Malcolm and Martin. I believe that photo was taken in 1963 or 64. I'll have to check. And it was the only time that Dr. King and Malcolm X met each other in person. And it was in Washington, D.C. I believe it was in March of 1964. Something like that. But I'm not 100% sure. Joie Lee and Ruby Dee on the steps on a brownstone in Brooklyn. And you see it there, it's just this really nice communal feeling of people just being themselves on a Saturday. This actual film takes place on a Saturday. And there's Ossie Davis. And he's really having a lot of fun there. I like the dynamic here again. Again, it's these 2 women who are really at comfort and ease with each other. The combing of the hair. You don't see this very much in films. Black women combing each other's hair. I think that's something very important because black hair is important, and black female hair, black women and hair is a very deep and important and intimate thing that That is something that's very personal. And so I thought that it was nice of Spike Lee to put that in here. All the New York newspapers, the tabloids, are talking about how hot it is on this day. Some of these are mock-up covers, of course. I think there was a cover, the New York Newsday that you might have seen there that went by. It said baked apple, and I think that was an actual cover that happened during the summer of 1988, or a summer in recent memory that was really hot in New York City. We all know about the summer of 76 and 77. It was very hot in lots of the world. In London, it certainly was in 76. And I think in New York it was too. And in 77, it was really hot in New York. And you had all these people just taking things from stores because there had been a power outage in New York in 77. And people were just taking every television set they could find in a moment of chaos and craziness with the power outages throughout New York City. It was absolutely wild, absolutely wild. And you see these two young brothers scraping up the sidewalk there, and they're trying to get their the instrumentalities for the hoses, the fire hoses there, and it's going to make that water really travel. So you can see the effect. Everybody's getting soaked. Whoa. And now Ella, played by Krista Rivers here, is going to get soaked as well. Oh dear, oh dear. Even Sam Jackson's getting into it too. I love those glasses. They're actually squirting out water from those glasses. That's a really great prop that's being used there. Here's Radio Raheem, played by now the late Bill Nunn. He passed away a few years back. And as I said, Radio Raheem is going to be a very instrumental character here. He walks around with his boombox. He doesn't say anything really. He walks through, everybody respects him. And he's kind of the speak softly and carry a big boombox type of guy. And he does so to resonant effect throughout this movie. He is another anthem. He is a chorus of his own here. Here is Frank Vincent, and now the late Frank Vincent. Played in a lot of different movies, a lot of gangster movies, including Goodfellas. And here he is as a person driving through this neighborhood. And again, at this time, Bedford-Stuyvesant is an all-black neighborhood, fairly, pretty much, in the 1980s. Now it's unrecognizable. It's a gentrified neighborhood. In fact, Spike Lee harkens to this later on in the film. But you see that Frank Vincent's character is threatening and getting hostile in the neighborhood. Don't soak me. Don't get any water on me. And of course, you know he's going to get it. You know he's going to get it. And he does. He gets it full force. Another one of the very funny moments. And you see how dry his hair is there. That's really funny how dry Frank Vincent's hair is. But there you can tell that he's completely soaked. So, now you can see his hair is wet. So they obviously did some editing there, because you can see now he is really wet. And his hair is all messed up there. And his shirt is soaked through the bone to the skin. And you see these two cops. One of them is Daniela, the third, with the wrench over his shoulder. And the other one is Miguel Sandoval, who is there with the book out, writing with it. Now, you can see here, I think it's Rick Aiello, actually. Rick Aiello is the person there with the hydrant and the spanner that he's using to tighten up the hydrant. He passed away. So a number of people have passed away from this movie. And I love this exchange here. They're brothers. Here he is. This is Rick Aiello. He is no longer with us now. And, they both had this joke here, Sandoval and Frank Vincent. They're brothers. Mo and Joe Black. Yeah, they're brothers. It's another funny line. There's a lot of funny lines, a lot of humor in this film, but there's a lot of pain as well, and we know why. Those that know, those that tell don't know, and those that know won't tell. That's Ossie Davis's famous line as well from the film. Oh, you don't want to go swimming in Coney Island. There, Rick Aiello, as the cop, is telling people, you want to swim, go to Coney Island. Coney Island is not the swimming place. Now, there are the Polar Bear Club that go when it's really, really cold early in January to get themselves really into the swing of how freezing it is. And they will do a little dive into the pool, into the swimming, into the water. But Coney Island is not a swimming place, I guarantee you. Great place to be, but not a place to be swimming. You can see here that Vito and Mookie here are like brothers. It's interesting, both of them are like the brother that they didn't have. I mean, Vito is the brother that Mookie doesn't have, and Mookie is the brother that Vito wished he had. They're all standing in front of the We Love Radio set. I love that set. And you see Sam Jackson in the background there. He's trying to get their attention. And you see that both Vito and Mookie are talking about their siblings. And they're just talking about what to do with Pino, Vito's brother, who keeps bullying and harassing Vito. And so Mookie's giving him an advice to hit his brother one time and he'll stop bullying you. You see Anita Baker there in the background. And again, Tracy Chapman. So there's this musical tradition that is infused through the neighborhood and in this radio station, this set. I really love Billy Ocean there in the background too on the wall. You talk about brothers on the wall, where there's lots of brothers and sisters on the wall in this radio station studio that is literally just a few steps away from Sal's Famous Pizzeria. And I've seen this film a number of times. This is the first time I really noticed that there was that contrast between all the brothers and sisters on the wall in the radio station that you see Sam Jackson operating versus the white people on the wall inside the pizzeria place of Sal's Famous. Just noticed that, and I believe me, this is not the first time I've seen Do the Right Thing. Not the first time I'm seeing Bill Nunn here either. He is back as Radio Raheem, and he now has the ire of the Puerto Rican contingent who have had enough of his loud music. Oh, it's too loud. Oh, dear. Oh, you got to turn that down. But instead of asking him to turn his box down, they're going to go here. Stevie here is going to go and turn up his box and turn up that salsa music. Not to be outdone, of course, Radio Raheem will come back with his response. For some reason, I thought that there was another back and forth between the dueling volumes of music, but I guess there never was. And Stevie relents, he surrenders, gives up and says, it's yours, you win. And I just love that kind of duality between these two sets of music. Again, I talk about duality being a repeating theme throughout. So now it's two different music styles, two different genres of music, rap versus salsa, salsa versus rap, and the volumes, right? And so that's a competition on a hot summer's day. Everything is a competition now in a hot summer's day. Things that may not have been paid closer attention to now in the heat of a day or in the heat of a pandemic, if you will, become so much more magnified. That's the way that goes. Yeah, it's bugging out. Trying to keep his dick hard and cool in a harsh world. And then you've got Vito and bugging out, telling each other how they think of what they think of each other. And there's another white character here, clutzing his way through, charging his way into bugging out, not saying sorry to bugging out. And that is an experience that we as black people are routinely aware of, where we get pushed or jostled, or and no apology comes from a white person who may have done that. And so bugging out now is furious because that's happened to him now. And not only that, his sneakers are all messed up. And here comes the references to gentrification. And Spike Lee is talking about this in 1989. And now, in this day and age, gentrification has become the theme across the world. There are people all over the world who have experienced this displacement, especially black people. And particularly here in the United States, it's been going on for decades now. And in New York, there are neighborhoods that aren't as black or as rich culturally as they used to be. Brooklyn's changed a great deal. Bedford-Stuyvesant, as I mentioned, has changed a great deal. Harlem has changed a great deal. It is no longer the Harlem that I remember. You know, there's still some black businesses there, and there are obviously still black people there, but it's not the same Harlem. As Bob Seger once said, this same music ain't got the same soul. You know, I'm not quoting him correctly, but that's what I want some old time rock and roll. You know, this music ain't got the same soul. And I think that's true of Harlem. It's so different now. It's so much whiter in Harlem now. It doesn't have the same characteristics that it used to. There are still some businesses. As I said, you got the Apollo Theater, you got Sylvia's. Please patronize Sylvia Woods Restaurant up in Harlem. Sylvia's, fantastic place to eat. Also, you've got Red Rooster as well, terrific as well, black owned. But you don't have a whole lot of black owned businesses up there anymore. And you can tell the composition of the neighborhood's changed so much. It really has changed a whole lot. And I think for the most part for the worse. There's some good things, but there are a lot of not so good things about that, because again, the cultural identity of the neighborhood has disappeared. The Schomburg is still there, the Schomburg Center, thank goodness. But apart from that, and Sylvia's and Red Rooster and the Apollo and one or two other places, Harlem is completely diluted now. And it's a shame. Pino talking about how much he hates this place. And these cops hate this place as well. You can just see on the left there, Rick Aiello, who I said is no longer with us. And then on the right, Miguel Sandoval. And now we're looking at Frankie Faison, I believe it is his name. And you've got Robin Harris, who's no longer with us. And then you've got Paul Benjamin, who you'll see next. And he is no longer with us either. You'll see Paul Benjamin in a moment. And there he is, Paul Benjamin, no longer with us either. But all three of them and these two white cops are engaging in this stare down. And these two racist cops are really telling you what they feel about these three black men, and how these white cops, NYPD, come into black neighborhoods and treat them as if they are war zones, and they behave as if black folk are somehow these pathologically dangerous people. And of course, we know that that is not true. And we know that institutionalized racism accounts for this kind of cavalier attitude. It comes from the system itself. And the system tells these cops to be free to flaunt their own racist and violent impulses. And that continues to happen now. Police killing black people on these streets here in the United States. And it keeps happening day in and day out. Black men, black women, black boys, black girls murdered by police, killed by police. And they are minding their own business. These people who are getting shot to death mind their own business, and brown people as well being killed in these streets by police, you know, police who are supposed to uphold, serve, and protect the neighborhoods that they're in. Now these three men are arguing about the businesses, like I said earlier. You know, they want to know why it is that black people don't have their own businesses in the neighborhood there in Bedford-Stuyvesant, and yet you've got Koreans having a business in the neighborhood, Italian Americans as well, Italians having a business in the neighborhood, but where are the black businesses? That's what this discussion's about. And yeah, there's some truth in the idea that, yeah, you know, we're told in this country to be less than, and that's a truth. That happens, and it has happened historically. We've been made to feel inferior. You know, a whole cultural system through its movies, its TV, through its education system, through segregation, through Jim Crow, through a lot of things, has tried to reinforce this notion somehow that black folk are inferior. Now, we're not inferior at all. It is a product of institutionalized racism and enslavement, and this attitude amongst white people, you know, and a lot of other people as well, whether they may be South Asian, whether they may be some black as well. You know, this idea that somehow the white man's ice is colder than the black person's ice. That's a mentality and a conditioning of whiteness, of this belief that somehow white persons are somehow superior, which of course they are not. It is a belief born out of the violent and oppressive system that we have here, that oppresses black and brown folk and indigenous folk. I love the tree in the background as it gently rustles. You may look in the background and see that white sky. It's kind of extra light because a lot of the filming at some points, the clouds were in the background and it was very cloudy. And so if you want a hot day in the summer, you don't necessarily expect to see a very cloudy sky. Of course, because that's really not a hot summer's day in that true sense. It's typically sunny. Not to say that you can't have hot days that are humid and hot with gray skies and white skies, but you know, it was raining in some of these scenes, and so they had to do all kinds of things cinematography wise, Ernest Dickerson, and the lighting to make it feel like it was still very hot. And so they oversaturated the light in some of these scenes to make it seem as if it was still very sunny and very hot. I love this line again. I talk about how the three men at the corner were talking about who they could have been in life. At least my impression of it. And now you see Ossie Davis doing the same thing, you know, talking about his own pain and his own hurts, why he's a drunkard, why he walks around drinking beer, and he talks about all of that. He probably was a family man. He had a wife and children, and they probably all abandoned him because of his alcoholism and because maybe he's responding to an oppressive society, a racist society, an anti-black society that has oppressed him. And now you've got this younger generation who is saying, come on, old man, get up and stop drinking. You're just an albatross in the neighborhood. And you see vigorously here, Steve White, who plays the guy in the LA Lakers shirt there, is really arguing that case. And he's condemning the elder. And look, that's a complete disrespect of the elders in our community. Black culture and African culture talks about respecting elders and really putting them at the seat of power and respect. And Steve White's character just completely desecrates that idea. And there's that generational divide. So you've got that going on, the dualism I talk about between the younger and older generations. But I thought that was a very compelling line there. Unless you've seen your wife standing there and your 5 hungry children looking at you, you don't even know what to do. You don't even know. You can't even look at your wife. I think that's all very relatable for millions of people, you know, in the United States who are in that position, especially millions of black people many black people who are in that predicament below the poverty line. It's not true of every black neighborhood or black family, though. But it is true of a lot of different families, be they black or brown. And there's certainly some white families who are going through that too. But it's very different because, of course, when you're looking at the racist aspect and the anti-black aspect of things, it's just a further intensifying of the oppression. I love this set. This set is terrific. Again, it's built on the corner of one of the block on the street which the film's taking place on. After the film finished shooting, they struck this set. It was completely built on the street. There were some vacant lots, and that's why the film takes place on this particular one block, because it was scouted and there were some vacant lots. They built for a few weeks these sets, and then after the filming was over, they struck the sets, destroyed the sets, and they allowed people to take away some of the artifacts from the sets. I love this sequence here between Pino and Mookie. And Pino doesn't want to admit that he's a big fan of all these black artists. And Mookie's telling him, look, you love these people and you're calling them the N-word and you're calling them N. And then you've got this absurd rationalization in quotes, by Pino saying, well, Eddie Murphy, he's not really black, Prince is not really black, you know. You know, Michael Jordan, he's not really black. Magic Johnson's not really black. This kind of nonsense. And this is this kind of bizarre rationalization that this white character makes. And I wonder if there are white people who actually feel this way, that they don't see these people as black. They see them as something different. And so they, somehow rationalize that. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not true. Again, this introduction of reality into the fictional aspects of this film, Minister Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, and Reverend Sharpton and Reverend Jackson, and how Pino's talking about them. He's actually done some reading, and I think Mookie mocks him about that and says, you wish you were black, and says, black people started civilization, all of which are true. And I do think that Pino probably does wish that he was black. And, this whole thing about dark Italians. Fourth wall gets broken here. You see Mookie shouting into the camera, or saying into the camera, these very anti-Italian slurs and racist slurs in that way. And you've got the anti-black racism of Pino. Mookie saying these anti-Italian things, and you've now got Pino saying these racist, these anti-black racist things. And then this is all fourth wall being broken, talking directly to us, taking this time out to just throw their attitudes about the people they're talking about in our faces. You've got Steve there shouting about the Koreans talking. You've got Rick Aiello's cop character, shouting about Puerto Ricans who he hates. And you've got the Asian character here, played by Steve Park, really saying a lot of anti-Jewish things there. And then you've got Samuel L. Jackson playing Mr. Senior Love Daddy, saying, look, you all need to calm down and relax, And I love that. And he talks into the camera too. So he's kind of moderating this free-for-all in a way. Even though he comes in at the end, he's kind of moderating all this. It's as if that was some kind of commercial for the film, It's kind of like as if Mr. Senior Love Daddy was doing a commercial bit there. It's like, and now for our new messages, now for these messages. And then the messages that come through are these, hateful things that are being said that you just saw and heard. And then we come back to Mr. Senior Love Daddy saying, hey, look, time out. Let's cut from commercial and come back here. I find that to be interesting. Again, the breaking of the fourth wall that's done a couple of times in this film. I love that set. I really do. As Sal's working on the next pizza to be made. And then there's Mookie. And they're just kind of talking there. And, Mookie wants his money now. and not later. See the shadows beginning to come across now as we get toward the evening portion of this long, hot summer's day in Bedford Stuyvesant. Do or die, Bed-Stuy. Radio Raheem is back, and there's Mookie, and you're going to see love and hate over the knuckles of Bill Nunn's character there, Radio Raheem. And this is an homage to the 1955 film Night of the Hunter, directed by Charles Lawton, in which the Robert Mitchum character, who is an unforgettable character, has the words love and hate written on his knuckles in the same way. And now what Radio Raheem is doing is paying, and Spike Lee is doing, is paying homage to that sequence in The Night of the Hunter. You really have to watch that film. It's directed by Charles Lawton, who was an actor, and that was the only film he directed, The Night of the Hunter. But here, love and hate is being used in a very different way. And Radio Raheem is giving you for the first time his feelings. We've not really heard much from Radio Raheem up to this point, but now for the first time we're beginning to get a sense of who Radio Raheem is, who he is, and what he feels and what he thinks. And he's talking about this philosophy of love versus hate and how these two entities come together. Again, this dualism, again, between two polar opposites, right? These are things that are in human beings. We've just seen it with the 4 or 5 characters who said these very hateful things to us into the camera, and now you're seeing the duality of that, the other side of it, the love part, where you see these two brothers extending hands and shaking hands, and they love each other as human beings genuinely. And so you see that dynamic, love versus hate. And now we see the tension again here as Radio Raheem comes in, and it's not going to be for the first time, with his boombox into the Sal's Famous. So this is kind of a hint of what's to come, because if you've seen this film before, hopefully you will know that this is the kind of preview of what's going to happen toward the end. And Sal is shouting over this music. Now he turns off the boombox, does Radio Raheem. 2 slices. Now Sal's laying out the ground rules here about the music, and you see the angle here is slightly tilted. I love that. The camera's tilted at I don't know what degree that is, maybe a 30-degree angle, 20-degree angle, maybe a bit more. And you see how that's done. It's done in a very, I think, a really, really smart way. And you see that things are off kilter, which is the point. Instead of having the camera float, the camera's fixed and tilted at an angle, and so it suggests that things are out of whack. And it suggests that the things aren't in balance. Now we're back to a fixed shot, and you see, again, lots of life in this building. You've got the cute little kid there on the step, and you've got Mookie coming back from another delivery. He's got some tips. Mousy is the character on the step, and you've got these kids running through the neighborhood. The life it kind of reminds me of Charles Burnett's Killer of Sheep in a way, in the sense that life is always all around us, and people are just being themselves amidst all the difficult circumstances and the ups and downs of life. That this neighborhood is still thriving, and it still manages to move on and be the vibrant force that it is. And you see the 3 cornermen who are actually standing up, 1 or 2 of them there. You see them in the deep background there, Robin Harris and Frankie Faison, and you see Bugging Out, and you see Smiley here, who finally gets his photo of Malcolm X and Dr. King sold. And Mookie saying, "Don't bug me anymore, I'm done." He's purchased the photo. And in he goes to the apartment that he lives in with his sister, Jade, played by his real life sister, as I've said. I love the colors. Look at the colors here. You've got fuchsia in the background there. You've got this lavender colored wall, these lavender colored walls. It's such a lovely, beautiful, colorful arrangement, and the birds and colors there. Color is a really good thing, and this film pulsates with color. Color is a good thing for you. It's good to wear different colors. I think some people here in the Western world scorn that. But I think people, men, women, people in general, should wear color more. I think it brightens the mood. It makes you look even better. I think color can be very sexy if it's worn in the ways that it can be worn. And I'm not talking about with lingerie. I mean just in ordinary clothing and socks and shirts and shorts and dresses and blouses and tops. I think all of those things, shoes, color is a really beautiful, vibrant, sexy, life affirming thing. And everybody seems to wear three colors, especially men. It's either black or blue or gray. It's very monochromatic in that way, very monochromatic. Those are colors that are really, I think, fairly drab, and they can be good on their day. But my goodness, there needs to be more colors on the spectrum. There's many colors on the spectrum, and I think people should wear more of them. They shouldn't just wear basic black, brown, or gray, or black, brown, or blue or gray. I mean, those are really the colors. It's really black, blue, and gray. And come on, there's a lot more colors on the spectrum than that. I love how the camera slowly pushes past Ruby D here onto the neighborhood, while Sam Jackson's voiceover of all these great artists in the black music tradition, the American music tradition, all of these people that Mr. Senior Love Daddy shouts out here, who are very integral to the history of music. And I love how the heat simmers and shimmers off here in that shot that you see of the three men. And I love this roll call of all of these artists, Whitney and Prince and Little Richards, Jackie Wilson, Mahalia Jackson, Cannonball and Nat Adderley, so many, Quincy Jones, Marvin Gaye. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, these are all really, really great shout outs to these people. Michael Jackson was not mentioned, by the way, in there. But make no mistake, Spike Lee and Michael Jackson knew each other. And in fact, Michael Jackson actually wandered into, not he was invited, but wandered through the neighborhood in Brooklyn, Fort Greene area of Brooklyn, to Spike Lee's home in the middle of the night one night, unnoticed. He was heavily disguised, and he walked the street in Brooklyn, New York, in Fort Greene, and stopped by at Spike Lee's house. And Spike Lee has been doing block parties for Michael Jackson. Michael has passed away, as we know. And, Spike does block parties for him and for Prince, both of whom are no longer with us, It's sad that both of them are no longer here. Neither of them, to the best of my knowledge, hit the age of 60. Michael passed away at 50, and I think Prince was 57 maybe. Or if he was in his 60s, he was barely into his 60s, Prince. But both of these hugely talented individuals no longer here with us. Now, this is very telling, this particular scene between Sal and Pino, because while Bugging Out wanted pictures on the wall, Pino wants out of the neighborhood. He believes that there should be this separation and segregation. And we know that the country here in the United States is heavily segregated still. And Pino's giving you his racist spiel, if you will. And Danny Aiello says, why have you got so much anger in you? Instead of challenging the hatred and saying, that's racist, you have to stop that. I didn't raise you to be this way. Sal says, why have you got so much anger in you? And I think that's a strange thing to say. I think that the line should be, why are you so racist? You have to stop that. This is not acceptable. But Sal's character tellingly does not say that to his own son, which for me signals like father, like son, is that there's a tacit endorsement of the racism coming from his son. His son didn't just wake up saying all these racist things. He got them from somewhere. And the question is, where did he get them from? Now, of course, there's the racist society, but you'd have to say, obviously, racism is taught as well. And it's obvious that he gets it from his own father. And his father here is justifying why they should stay in Bedford Stuyvesant in this black neighborhood, because he wants to kind of, in this very paternalistic way, say, hey, they love my food, and look, they really do love what I cook for them, and that's why I should stay here and make money here. But he doesn't want to go back to Bensonhurst, where they come from. And Bensonhurst was a very racist place back in 1989. As I told you earlier, Yusuf Hawkins was murdered there by 30 white men, and Yusuf Hawkins was there to answer a used car ad. He wanted to buy a car, and he got murdered. He got killed for that. Would you believe? Of course you understand, and you believe that. You know that in this country that we as black people are not free to go wherever we choose. And again, here you see the racism, and you see Danny Aiello there just meditating on all of this. He's not doing anything to stop Pino from saying all these racist things. He's not. He's just calmly sitting there and drinking his ice water or whatever it is he's drinking, his Diet Pepsi or whatever it is. And he's just sitting there and let it happen. He's not saying anything. Look, that to me is a very telling sign that Sal is a racist. I mean, you can see Pino's haranguing Smiley, and he's haranguing the cornermen who are telling him to get a job. It's very clear to me that that's what's happening here. The fruit does not fall far from the tree at all. And here's the kind of condescending and patronizing thing that Sal does. Oh, here's a few dollars for you, Smiley. And then he says he didn't mean it. He didn't mean it. Yeah, right. So he completely defends his son, doesn't castigate his son at all. I think that should be your first clue that Sal is not the kind of person that he presents himself to be. This very amiable, likable, go along to get along guy who has his set of rules and ideas about the world. Now, this is bugging out, trying to activate the black community. He wants them to join him in a boycott of Sal's Famous. And of course, Robin Harris delivers this great line here about boycotting that goddamn barber. One of the funniest lines of the movie. It's too bad that Robin Harris is no longer here. He was not even 40 when he passed away, to the best of my knowledge. He was only 36, I think. And of course, the neighborhood does not go along with this boycott. They think that bugging out literally is bugging out crazy here. Because as you hear Martin Lawrence there in the yellow shirt, reminding him of that. I'll do it without your help. Well, there's Brooklyn's own Mike Tyson. And I love that mural. And you see Sal jump here as bugging out says, we're going to boycott your damn place, And you see the pugilism in Sal, He's already trying to, spar with bugging out. See, he's hurt himself trying to spar with bugging out from afar. So you see these tensions already. And I love the way this is written. This film is so well written because these strands do start to thread together and pull together. Rather than unravel, they kind of pull together and unravel at the same time, because most of the neighborhood activity, and you see the blue sky there again, is very innocuous for the most part. You're just really looking at a neighborhood and these episodes. It's a very episodic film in that way. There's no real structured plot to the film. It is a series of vignettes, and not even that. It's just these elemental things in the neighborhood that are happening on this one day, on this one block. And at first it's not clear, okay, where is this going? But it's very clear where it's going, because from the very start we know where it's going. From the moment that the music plays, Lift Every Voice and Sing, from the moment we see Rosie Perez dancing, we know where this movie's going. We actually do. And then the opening scenes, we know where this movie's going. And here's Jade telling, bugging out, yeah, I can hear you about your boycott, but you've got to convert your passion and your anger into something positive for the community and constructive. There's things that you can do that can really lift the community rather than boycotting one white business, which he has every right to call for. Because look, there was the Montgomery bus boycott that lasted over 2 years, or certainly lasted, yeah, almost 2 years, I think it was. It was over 2 years or close to it. In 1955, it went for nearly 2 years, the Montgomery bus boycott. And that was very successful, and then it stopped. But if it had continued, black folk could have also platformed their own businesses at the same time, and they really would have had a lot of economic power. Black people in the United States have tremendous economic power, billions and billions of dollars of spending. We would be the eighth or ninth most richest country on the planet as a nation, just of black people alone, based on our spending power. But we still fall trap and prey to consumerism, and it really does affect things. And I think that that's what Jade kind of talks about, but not in the depth that I've just talked about it in. And here's tension too. Look at Sal. He's really flirting with Jade, and you see that, listen, Mookie's not having it. He's not having it, and nor is Pino. They both know what's going on here. Oh, it's so funny, these real close-ups of these two guys. And so now you've got Radio Raheem, and now his music has been slowed down by the batteries that, I guess they're so hot that the batteries have basically melted on his boombox, and now his boombox isn't working. And you've got this too, this married couple who own the business, the Korean couple here. You've got, again, funny lines here. You've got Radio Raheem talking about the batteries. Oh, and you see Radio Raheem is just give me the damn batteries, 20 de-energizer, check the date on them. Oh dear, dear. I have to say, it's just very funny. Oh gosh. Check the date on them. Check the date. Can you hear? Oh dear, dear. That set that Radio Raheem walks out of, that was built onto the sidewalk, literally. It's built up against the wall onto the sidewalk. It's actually built, it's a set. It was just built, even the brick wall is a set. That's just, I think, a cardboard cutout. And it looks very real. And the set designer, Wynn Thomas, production designer, did an excellent job here with this. I love how the neighborhood, you see it's beginning to get dark, and it's sunset now. And the mayor, played by Ossie Davis, wants to buy. And, you got the Korean woman here, I think her name's Ginny in the movie. And she says, oh, it's very expensive, as if black folk can't afford flowers, right? And, that wouldn't be said to a white customer. It's very expensive. She wouldn't have said that to a white customer, but she sees this black man and she makes this assessment about him. Whether he's dressed well or not is not the point. It's that there's this, well, they're very expensive, as if a black person can't afford to buy flowers. But as the sun goes down, like Fleetwood Mac once said in one of their songs, and there's not another living soul around. You keep me up as the sun goes down, and you say you love me. I think that's approximating the lyrics of Fleetwood Mac's song, "Say You Love Me." And I think in some ways, Ossie Davis's character Demare is trying to reach out in that same way to Ruby Dee's character Demare. They're the real life husband and wife team here, and you see how there's really not much at all that mother sister says here, and she's listening for once to Demare, who leaves her some lovely, lovely roses, blooming roses. And she's kind of not succumbing to him in any way. She's just listening to him. She's just considering, It's just great. Lovely acting. I just love what Ruby Dee did here as Ossie Davis did, and all these characters. I love how Robin Harris says to Radio Raheem, you should be playing Bobby Blue Bland, and you should know that Bobby Blue Bland, very famous blues musician, really good, really, really good, and that from a different generation. But Radio Raheem probably would not ever play Bobby Blue Bland. It's this generational gap again that's going on. And you see here these three men again talking about life on the corner, and and now they're talking about again talking why he was called Sweet Dick Willie, and then Robin Harris in the middle there, as Sweet Dick Willie is saying, well, everybody knows why they call me that. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Those bars in the windows there, again, as I said earlier, it's kind of this prison in a way. And you notice all these bars around them and these lines and the brick wall there. It's kind of and then the close-ups. Again, they're kind of trapped. They're trapped in their circumstances, not because they choose to be, but because the society has had its oppression, its hooks into them, and it's a very oppressive atmosphere. And they're all looking at the women who are running or walking by. I bet I see her naked on payday. There's the idea of the heat of the summer and what it brings out in men, although it doesn't have to be hot for men to say all these things to women, a lot of them very sexist things. And there's that borderline between appreciation and disrespect. And so that's another thing, you can admire and appreciate a woman, but you can do that without having to denigrate her, and sure, there may be 0.2% of women who might like to be called in that way, in a more pejorative way, publicly. But the vast majority of women do not want to be called nasty names. I mean, they just don't. Not in public, and not in any circumstance really at all, unless they say, hey, look, I like that, which again is very, very few and far between. And it's just that kind of sexism that some men exhibit, a lot of men, that many men exhibit, in a sexist society, and a misogynistic one. I love this here again. Again, you see another black woman in the film. And this is the mother of the child whom the mayor just saves the life of. And the child lies. His name is Eddie. He lies to his own mother about what happened to him and why he got hurt. And so the mayor's explaining that to the mother of Eddie here, to Eddie's mother. And watch what happens here. I just love this scene. And there you go. She disciplines him, spanks him right in front of everybody. And, he lies, and they're all these men are shouting for her to ease up on him. And they're all looking at him, looking at her. And Ossie Davis is telling her, hey, look, you really shouldn't do that to him. But I love the line from the woman here, Eddie's mother, because Eddie's mother is correct. I won't have anybody question how I raised my child. And I think she's absolutely right. I mean, because we don't have that anymore in the society, because people are so terrified, particularly here in the United States or in Western Europe as well, of being sent to child services because they dare spank their child. That was an act of discipline back in the day, in the 50s and the 40s and the 60s, in the 1970s. That was perfectly acceptable to do that. But now we are living in a culture in this day and age where you can't even really touch your child anymore to discipline them, because there's this fear that you might get called upon to child services, and then your child gets taken away from you and you don't have custody of your child. I mean, that's how it's become now. Here's an advisory, and this is based on something that's since been very tangled, Tawana Brawley, and you'll see the graffiti behind them, and you see what Mookie's doing here with Jade. He's telling her, you're not welcome in South famous pizzeria, because Sal's not interested in talking to you as a person. He's interested in going to bed with you. And you just have to be aware of that. So it's the case of the little brother looking out for the big sister. Now, in reality, Spike is older than Joie Lee is. But the point is, in this movie, Joie Lee, as Jada, plays the older sister to the Mookie character that Spike plays here. And he's just trying to tell her, look, you have to be really careful here, you know? And she's the one supporting him because he lives at her apartment. And watch this pull out here to Tawana Told the Truth. That's a reference to Tawana Brawley, who had said that she had been raped and desecrated by some white men, including a district attorney in Westchester. And a grand jury refused to indict this person and others for doing that. And I think something did happen to her, although Reverend Al Sharpton admitted later on, years later, after this took place in 1988, that that the claim, in his view, was false. But they're still back and forth about that, because there's been lots of findings to suggest that Tawana Brawley did not have this happen to her. But you're kidding me. There's no way someone's going to write. You're going to tell me that she wrote feces, wrote the N-word on herself, and wrote all kinds of things on herself in feces and put herself in a black paper plastic bag? I don't think so. Something definitely happened to Tawana Brawley, in my view. Here's the first time now, and you see how the lovely cinematography of Night that's cultivated by Ernest Dickerson really comes into view. Watch that light just come on over the shoulder in the background of Ossie Davis, and look how it hits the shine on his face. I think it's really well done. And this is the first time that the mother-sister character acknowledges the bravery of DeMare. And he's now getting carried away in his own reverie of the days of yore, the halcyon days for him when he was a lot younger in 1939, years before this moment, at least in the terms of the story of this film, 60 years before this moment where he was this athlete and he was running around the bases playing baseball and he was so fast, and now, he's kind of going back to that time in his life. This is someone who was probably successful, but like as I say, he ended up getting impoverished, and all kinds of circumstances of life happened to him, and he's now either widower, or he's someone who had been abandoned by his family. And so you can see that Mother Sister's now warming up to him as the sun goes down. And again, this is another, I hate to keep injecting Fleetwood Mac, although I'm a big fan of theirs, another say that you love me moment. Say you love me, as a loving, and the loving starts when the lights go down and there's not another living soul around. And now we see Mookie and Tina. This is the first time that Mookie and Tina are actually seeing each other face to face in this film. They've been talking about each other and been on the phone to each other, but this is now face to face, the first time during this long, hot summer day that they are together. And you can see there's a naturalness about their chemistry. I like how the light is focused here. It is lit in a way that you can see the shadow, suggesting that it's night. And it's fixed here, so there's very little other light that goes, and you see how the shadow is not diffused to, it's diffused to the back, and in the way it's shot, you don't see the shadows on their faces, you see them on the walls. And that's the way the lighting works. It works really well here. Now, I think that this scene actually got shot during the day, that it was done in a very smart way to make you think that it's night, the day for night sequences. And of course, we now find out that Mookie is the father of Hector, the child that they'd had together there, and that we saw earlier. So now the pizza's been brought in, and Rosie Perez, who plays Tina here, and I must say this is very interesting because We know that Rosie Perez has talked about this. When she did this scene, she was very unhappy with the scene and said that she's been quoted as saying that she cried during the scene that you're going to be seeing here when she goes topless and the camera does a real close up, extreme close up of her breasts, and you see her bare breasts on camera. And Rosie Perez said that you didn't see her face in that moment because she was crying. Now, that's what she says, that's what she's been quoted as saying. And so that's something that, again, it's the thing that Spike Lee does have problems with, and he has acknowledged this in the years since, that he has not been as good as he should have been in some of his films in depicting women. And I would agree with him. I think that that's one of his weaknesses, really, as a filmmaker. He's an excellent filmmaker. I think one of his weaknesses is the way he portrays women. And a lot of male directors are guilty of this too. It's very one-dimensional portrayals of women and very sexist portrayals of women, misogynistic ones. I can think of people like Stanley Kubrick, very misogynistic portrayals of women throughout his movies. You can think of a lot of male directors, Alfred Hitchcock as well, very misogynistic portrayals of women in a lot of his films. Not all his films, but a lot of them. There's this, the blonde-haired white woman and what happens to her in a film. It's all very one-dimensional, and there's lots of others. And this is something that's endemic, and it needs to stop. We can't write off an entire group of people, and you have to treat them with respect. I mean, we all have our flaws, but there's no need to dominate women or portray them in these ways that are sexist and misogynist. And I think Spike Lee would agree with that. I really love the playfulness, though, of this scene with the ice cube on the forehead, and Sam Jackson you saw there in his studio there in the We Love studio. And I love the lighting there. It's kind of indigo blue that you just saw a few moments ago. This is very sensual right here, as is that. Now, if he had left it here, I'd be fine with it. And here, that should be it. But he goes further here. And again, all of this is fine except for, I think, the breasts. We don't need to see her breasts on camera like this. And again, Rosie Perez says she was crying at this moment during this scene here. I mean, that's a completely unnecessary shot for that scene. I really don't think that needs to be there. It really doesn't. It's this objectification. And again, I think this is lovely. I think this is all fine. But if you take out the breast shot, nothing gets lost in the intimacy of this moment at all. It doesn't need to be there. That's my one criticism of this film, is that shot with Rosie Perez's breasts on the screen in close-up, it's completely unnecessary to the flow and the intimacy and the sensuality of the scene. In fact, it weakens it. If you take that scene out, that shot out of her breast, and just keep everything else that we've just seen, the sensuality of it remains really tight. But when you see her breast, it kind of takes you out of that, jolts you out of it, and you get back into it. But it's kind of like, why was that shot even necessary again? And here's Sal revealing his contempt about the neighborhood. Oh yeah, I figure I'll buy a high rise here, put it up in the neighborhood, and then of course you've got these two cops referencing the piece of garbage who was in the White House in 2017 through 2021, the early part of it, and that particular individual was a full staple of New York life during the time of this movie coming out in 1989. The media in New York absolutely adored him. And now they claim as if they don't know him anymore. And, and it's like, no, you guys engineered this guy's rise to the White House. And now you try to act like he had nothing to do with it. But Sal definitely has contempt for the neighborhood. He reveals it to those two cops, the same two cops, when he says, oh yeah, I'll put a high rise up here in Bed-Stuy. And the reality is now you are seeing high rises in Bed-Stuy. You're going to begin to see that. All these shops and things that are coming in, You're going to see that all these office blocks and in Brooklyn in particular too, and at large in Brooklyn at large. I mean, this is happening. You look at Barclays Center in Fort Greene neighborhood there in Brooklyn, not far from where Spike Lee has his offices. The high rise, you have all these corporate office spaces going up. The gentrification, it's a real problem. Here's the duality again here, the cinematic duality theme of these two warring tribes. I liken this to Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel, the biblical confrontation between these two brothers, one of whom is respected, one of whom is not. And you've got Cain and Abel here, and, Vito is Abel, and I think Pino is Cain. And Cain kills his brother, right? So even though these two don't die in this film, you just see the aggressiveness here between the two of them, and Pino really being very heavy-handed and aggressive with his younger brother Vito. So this sibling rivalry is much more than that. It's more intense than that. And these two brothers who really aren't really brothers at the moment, they're warring factions, warring tribes. These two men are tribal with each other, and Pino's the one that's the foremost aggressor. Vito is probably one of the few characters in the film who I think is a genuine character. There's always one or two characters. I mean, there are other genuine characters in the film. They're all genuine characters, but what I mean by that is Vito's somebody who really wants to be a better person, I think. Here's the boombox, and it looks robust. And I remember those boomboxes back in the day. They were the thing. Now we don't even carry around boomboxes anymore. We carry around, music in our heads and in our ears, and we don't play them out loud anymore unless we're driving down the street sometimes and we have our car radio volumes up to all. And that's the only time you hear any boomboxes anymore in this country, at least. And if anything, now it's all in your headphones and it's streaming. I love this because you got to think about the fact that in 1988, it was a presidential election year. You see the Jesse Jackson posters. Jesse Jackson ran for president for a second time in 1988, and you see them ripped, and you see the word "dump Koch" there in graffiti. That to the I guess to the left-hand side screen side of Radio Raheem, and on his right as he's standing there against the wall. So Mayor Ed Koch was the mayor of New York City at the time in 1989, in 1988 as well, obviously, and he was coming up for election in the fall of 1989, and it was the primary. And Spike Lee said one of the reasons he made Do the Right Thing was to make sure that New York got rid of Ed Koch at the ballot box, and it succeeded because he ended up losing in 1989 in the primary. And you may remember, if you are a New Yorker in particular, that David Dinkins defeated Rudy Giuliani for the mayoralty of New York City, and he became the first black mayor of New York City in its history. David Dinkins, who now has since passed away himself. So there's the political background too, the election background of Jesse Jackson, who, was talked about earlier in the film by Pino. And you see now Pino here reacting with disbelief and indignance, really, in a way. Oh my goodness, you want to call this Sal and Sons famous pizzeria? Oh my gosh. And Mookie's not going for it either. Really? We don't even get along, and you want us to be Sal and Sons? You want to rename the business because you're going to leave it, and you're going to leave it for these guys? They don't even get along. I mean, Vito doesn't get along with his brother. Mookie doesn't get along with Pino, and Pino doesn't get along with either of them. And you're saying that they should be the owners? I mean, that's a lack of judgment by Sal right there. Also a lack of judgment allowing these four people to come in to the pizzeria when the pizzeria is closing. That's the thing that Sal has to take some responsibility for. What if Sal did not allow these people in? It's not like they're going to try to break down the pizzeria. They just have to go home. But because he opens the door to them, he's now opened the door to the other three characters you see here: Radio Raheem, Bugging Out, and Smiley. And the music is back on. It's a big hit with Sal, as we will see. And Radio Raheem is saying, "We are here." And Bugging Out wants those pictures up. And Mookie's saying, look, get the heck out of here, man. And here comes the racist tendencies in Sal. He starts to talk about jungle music, right? So there we go. That's the first thing that we know. And Sal's getting upset and angry. And we're beginning to see the issue here. And they're rooting for Sal at first there. The four of them kick some ass, Sal. And then we're going to see them not root for Sal. And you see the epithets there against Sal. And now this claim of black people being on the wall is more urgent now. And boom. And now here comes Sal's racism. And how we go here, we see the four of them are not having it. Oh, now that's what you're calling us now? So Sal says an N, and that's that. And now we're going to really see a confrontation here. And the racism of Sal, boom, and there we go. He smashes up that boombox of Radio Raheem with that baseball bat. That's Howard Beach all over again right there. Except instead of a human being that's being beaten with a baseball bat, it is Radio Raheem's heart and soul, his boombox. Here's this uneasy silence after what's just happened here. And this is like the death of a member of Radio Raheem's family. And then this gasoline put on the fire by Sal. I just killed your effing radio. And boom, Radio Raheem just throws Sal overboard here. And there's the stunt double that did that. And, everybody is just throwing up fists. And Martin Lawrence actually did get injured there when he goes, "You fucked up my eye." He actually gets punched in the eye inadvertently. And so on camera, as it was being caught, he ad-libbed that line. Actually, it wasn't even an ad-lib. It was an actual real line. And he just said it as it happened. And that's really very interesting and organic there. And you see that there's stunt. If you look really, really closely, you will see stunt doubles here. But, all of the conflagration now is a fourth wall event, because we are now getting these people spilling into our living rooms, onto our laps. And now the whole dynamic of this film changes completely changes. The angles of the camera. And now it's just a full-on conflagration, a full-on confrontation of people. And there is no more filter. There's no more distance between us and what's going on. And so it's those moments that were the fourth wall moments earlier, where we saw these characters talking into the camera at us, and now it's spilled out in a different way. And now the whole neighborhood is speaking to us in various ways with these cameras coming right at us. Until now, the police have broken that temporarily. And so that fourth wall gets broken, gets put back temporarily. And now we're beginning to see a more two-dimensional effect. And now look at the police, the white cops. The first thing they do is pull the black man off the white man. They don't try to pull Sal away and drag him away. Sal gets to stay on the ground and get up. Now these cops have pulled away Radio Raheem. And why are they continuing to pull him away? He's well away from Sal now, so they should leave him alone. And look, instead of leaving him alone, they are now going to kill him. And this is a sequence that is really difficult to watch. I find this the most difficult part of this film to watch. And it's so difficult to watch it because obviously we know we're going to be watching a man slowly dying, slowly getting killed, a slow motion assassination, an execution of someone. And we know how painfully real this is because it happens to us as black people every day in the United States and in other countries where the police kill us. And we see those legs moving and ankles shaking and feet shaking, and the last bit of life being throttled out of a young man who hasn't troubled anybody. He has a boombox, but he doesn't need to die for that. This idea that black life is somehow not worthy of existing anymore, and that someone would have a boombox and therefore he's got to die for that because he's got loud music, is not something that we as a society should be condoning, but we absolutely do condone it. We saw this with Michael Dunn, who killed Jordan Davis years ago. Loud music in a car. And the excuse of Michael Dunn was, well, he had loud music and so I had to, do something about that. And, it took 2 trials before Michael Dunn was convicted of murdering Jordan Davis, killing him, It's just unreal. And now we see it again here. We see the chokehold. We see what happened to Eric Garner. We see what happened to George Floyd and the sneakers, bugging out sneakers. He has his sneakers lightly trampled on by one white resident of the neighborhood, and now you've got state-sanctioned violence, and you see those close-up sneakers of Radio Raheem. So you see how the violence goes from one white individual vis-a-vis the violence against bugging out and the stepping on his shoes and dirtying them up. Then you see this larger white society state-sanctioned violence of these NYPD cops killing a man, and you see his sneakers being shaken. I mean, you see those parallels between the sneakers and how one man's life is affected and another man's life is ended by these 2 different white entities, one a white individual, one a state-sanctioned system of whiteness. And you see the fourth wall break again here, where they're all shouting and they're talking about these real people, Eleanor Bumpers and Michael Stewart and all these things. Our neighborhoods aren't safe, and they never were safe, never will be safe. And the thing is that black folk have had enough of this. They didn't have to kill the boy. It's as plain as day, as the ML says there. And you see Mookie just considering everything that's going on around him. And this is something that I think a number of white people that I had these discussions with back in 1989, I didn't think understood. They felt that, well, why are they burning down their own neighborhood? And my argument to them, and it still is that this isn't really their neighborhood as black people. They don't own anything in the neighborhood. They don't control anything in the neighborhood. They don't have any black businesses. This is what the 3 cornermen were talking about, earlier. They don't have any businesses in the neighborhood. It's an Italian business and there's a Korean business. And there aren't any black businesses. And there's lots of reasons why, systemic reasons why that's happened. It's not because black folk don't know how to do businesses. We've had a long history in this country of businesses. And just go to Rosewood in the 1920s. Go to Greenwood, Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921. Those businesses were black and thriving in this country. And there was many others like that. And then white people came into our neighborhoods and burned those to the ground and killed hundreds of black people in the process as well. And again, this is something that I think a lot of white people just either don't understand, don't want to understand, or just are genuinely ignorant of, or all 3, is that this neighborhood that these black people live in isn't truly theirs. It doesn't really belong to them. I would like you to read a book by Richard Rothstein called The Color of Law, and it explains why my point is so accurate about this neighborhood not really belonging to these black people who live in it. And here's Mookie, who takes this turn and smashes the pizzeria. And again, there are a lot of white people who don't understand that. Why would he do that? Well, there's very legitimate, clear reasons why, and I don't have to explain those. I think black people understand very well why Mookie threw that garbage can through the window. In fact, there's a lot of things that Spike Lee says about this. He says that there's never been a black person that's come up to him to ask him, well, why did he do that? But the only people who really have come up to him and asked him, why did Mookie throw that trash can through the pizzeria, are white people. The thing is that what happens is that now you're seeing this truth about American society, that in a white male, straight male, cisgendered patriarchy, more people in the country care about property. White people in the country care more about property than life. And that's what the country was built on after it was stolen and taken by force and violence from the Native Americans. You had a system in this country where white male property owners were the only ones who could vote. Rich white men with property. No one else could vote in the country. So property became the foundation of rights in the country. Land, ownership. That was political representation. And so because of that, there was this whole system of property-based rights. Before black people even had any rights in the country, black people were still in bondage at this time. Back at that time in the 1700s, in the 1600s. You see what's happening here. The pizzeria now is being set ablaze. And you see now that they want to go over to the Korean and ask him, say to him, look, it's your turn. We don't want you in our neighborhood. And they decide not to burn down the Korean place. And I think in hindsight, if this film was made maybe a couple of years later, I think, and if this film came out in 1991 or 1992, I think in hindsight, that would have changed. I think Spike Lee would have had them burn down that neighborhood, given what I told you earlier about the attack on the Haitian woman on Church Avenue in Brooklyn back in 1990, and the attack and the murder of Latasha Harlins in Los Angeles by a Korean grocer. And you see now that these residents are exulting in this business being burned down. I mean, the thing is, though, it doesn't solve the predicament of, there's still no black businesses. But the fact of the matter is that they view Sal's Pizzeria as a symbol of oppression. And they view the police coming into these neighborhoods, killing us as, and rightly so, part of the state-sanctioned violence and oppression and institutionalized and systemic racism that plagues this country, that continues to dominate the country, and the whiteness that is used as a power stricture and contempt mechanism, oppressive mechanism. And you heard the shouts of Howard Beach, again, that kind of injection of reality into this fictional film, which is very much a real movie. It's really based on, there's a lot of real events that are happening, events that mirror the reality of our existence as black people in the country. And I love how Sam Jackson here strips off his shirt. And you see the firefighters are also being attacked. And it's kind of very much 1960s here now, not 1989. It's very much Bull Connor and all the fire hoses and the barking dogs. And you actually will hear the voiceover of Wesley Snipes here talking about fucking Alabama is Birmingham, this is Bull Connor. And that's Wesley Snipes doing that voiceover ADR. And that is his uncredited moment in the film, because it's very much like that scene in the 60s when Bull Connor, police chief in Alabama, was doing this and sticking dogs on black people and having them rip chunks of flesh out of black people, and the water hoses that would go on. I mean, this all happened. So this is all a very real creation here in a movie that is a feature film, a fictional film, feature film. But it's all very real. And we know it is because it happens all the time. There's a conflict in Mother Sister. She has been talking earlier in this scene about burning it down. And then she says, no. And now you see DeMayer hugging her for the first time, but really consoling her. And now we see the pizzeria in flame. And this is a really striking moment. Because from the ashes, you still hear the Public Enemy anthem, and that's the boombox that's been crushed. Radio Raheem is dead. His boombox is dead as well. The pizzeria slices are all on the floor in a very greasy looking scene, obviously here. And you see a character walking in, and then we begin to see who it is. And it's Smiley as he puts the photo of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. on the wall, the brothers on the wall. These are the two brothers on the wall, but look, it's a burning cauldron. It's an inferno. And that's what it takes, right? And that's kind of a metaphor for what it takes for black people to get a measure of justice, is that we have to raise holy hell, and there's violence that happens too. And, we usually get justice through all of these mechanisms where we have to just keep protesting and we get killed, in order to get justice. That's how it goes. And a lot of times we have not got justice in this country, and when we do get justice, it's not because of anyone else, it's because of us. The next morning, and we see a resplendent looking Mr. Senior Love Daddy there. And of course, today's weather is going to be hot, and that does not change in a long, hot summer in New York City. I love the way that the camera captures Spike Lee looking up into the camera there with one eye. And that was replicated by Gus Van Sant in a film called Finding Forrester, when he does the very same thing with Rob Brown lying in the bed, except it's the other side. It's this homage to Spike Lee being played by Gus Van Sant. And again, the tones that Ernest Dickerson uses here, very effective. And he is able to give us the heat again with the fan in the background, the white light, soft light that comes through, and it's diffusive light through the fan that we see there. I don't know if that fan's a real fan or not, but I love the way it spins as the two of them argue and curse while their son is right between them in the bed. I don't know, maybe he's 4 or 5 years old. I don't know how old, maybe 4, maybe 3 or 4. And he's listening to all this cursing, and that when he becomes 8 or 9, he's going to be saying all these curse words, Oh dear, Hector, I feel for you. And you see the little mini boombox on the right side there, and then Tina's just cursing out Mookie. I love this performance by Rosie Perez. She was one of the other standouts. There's so many standouts in the film, but again, I just think she's great. She actually was nominated for an Oscar a few years later for a film called Fearless as a Best Supporting Actress nominee. Rosie Perez has done some really good work on film. She was in White Men Can't Jump as well, one of her films in the 90s as well, alongside Wesley Snipes, who I've mentioned earlier, and Woody Harrelson. And here are the deans of cinema, Ruby Dee and Ossie Davis, husband and wife, spouses, wife and husband. And I love how Ruby Dee says, "We're still standing." It's kind of this double meaning there. It's not just that they as two characters are standing, but it's also them as an institution in America. They're still standing, as obviously at the time of this movie, but no longer are they here with us. But they are an institution, the two of them. And two activists who really care about the world and care about black people. Now here's the score, and I haven't even talked about the score. Bill Lee, Spike's father, did the score for this film, and Brandon Marsalis was part of the orchestra, and Bill Lee scored this thing to a T. It's absolutely lovely to hear that score. The weight of the score, the tone of it, the discipline of it, and where it's put in the movie is so good. And the soundtrack, I didn't even talk about that either, right? The soundtrack of the film. People like Keith John and people like Public Enemy and people like Perry and Gerald Alston and, Take Six, and there's so many others, Ruben Blades, and I can go on and on, Teddy Riley, and so many other artists who I've probably forgotten here, and I apologize for not remembering your names, but you all did so great on the soundtrack. Two different soundtracks for this movie, one the score and one the songs. Steel Pulse also were in this soundtrack. This is a really good scene for Danny Aiello. I think it's the best scene for him when he talks about, look, I paid all this blood, sweat, and tears. I made this place, and you've just burned it down, and you stood there and watched. And Mookie's saying, hey, look, I also watched the cops murder Radio Raheem, and you know that you're going to get over by this insurance, and that's what sets off Sal's character. Sal just says, look, man, this isn't about money. This is about all my life. I've sweated to do this. And it's really a tale of an Italian immigrant, right? An immigrant family. That's what that is. You've destroyed my American dream, is what Danny Aiello is saying to Spike Lee's character. And that's what Sal's saying. You've destroyed my American dream here. But again, it shows you this duality. For him, as an American dream destroyed, for Mookie and the neighborhood, it's another black man murdered by the police. There was no American dream to begin with because, of course, for us as black people, we came here involuntarily. We were enslaved. Our ancestors were enslaved and brought here in chains. We never wanted to come to the United States. We never asked to come to America. And so that's the two dueling realities that are happening here. And again, they're even sparring over money to the very end as the pizzeria still burns out. The embers, the smoke is still visible here. And I love the cinematography here. And again, the production design of Wynn Thomas. And we know that they're never going to see eye to eye, these two. And they talk about the weather, but, there's really no other relationship here now. I would imagine that Mookie gets fired from this job. And there's going to be obviously no more pizzeria to be delivering pizzas from, at least not from Sal. And for Sal, he's going to have to go back to Bensonhurst, isn't he? I don't think he's opening up another pizzeria in the neighborhood. And I love how Spike Lee picks up the money. That always gets a laugh in theaters. And just imagine, to think that Joe Klein had the nerve, again, as a white critic, I'm sure he feels that he's entitled to do this. The nerve to suggest that black people would riot when watching this movie. I mean, that shows you how racist he is, how he gives this very low opinion of black people because that's what he thinks of us. And I love the references here to the election coming up. It's this another fourth wall breaker because at this time we were just 3 months away from the primary election in New York City for mayor, which Ed Koch lost in. I love this. I love that, again, the neighborhood still moves on despite this death that's happened. Radio Raheem has been murdered by the police, and I love the acknowledgement to Radio Raheem. We love you, brother, from Sam Jackson there. But this is not the end of the movie, because I think what you're about to see here is the most important part of the movie. The score again from Bill Lee coming through. And you're going to see two quotes. Again, this dualism, this jewelness, this two-ness that comes along. You're going to first see this quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's going to be followed by one from Malcolm X. And you should consider these two quotes. They are not throwaway lines or throwaway quotes at all. Violence as a way of achieving racial justice is both impractical and immoral. It is impractical because it is a descending spiral. You can see this quote here. And it just goes on. And at the end of it says, violence ends by defeating itself. It creates bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. And that's Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And then there's the quote from Malcolm X. Now, both of these two people, of course, have been featured throughout the movie. And these are two of the greatest orators that we've ever had in the United States and that the world has ever seen. And Malcolm X says, I think there are plenty of good people in America, but there are also plenty of bad people in America. And the bad ones are the ones who seem to have all the power and be in these positions to block things that you and I need. And he ends up talking about self-defense, violence and self-defense, which is exactly the situation that you saw in this movie. I mean, let's be honest, that's exactly what it was. They were reacting not just to the violent death of Radio Raheem, but also the violence that happens to us throughout history in this country as black people. Malcolm X's quote there, and you see that picture again, the very picture that Smiley has been selling, and that's the picture of the only meeting of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. And I just love this from Take 6, from the heart of Bed-Stuy, WELOVE. And those are 6 of the families that this film was dedicated to at the time. Now, if this film was coming out today, you'd have thousands and thousands of more names filling that screen. You wouldn't be able to fill the screen because you wouldn't be able to see all the names because there'd be so many superimposed over each other. All the people who've been killed by white violence, who are black, killed by white state-sanctioned violence as well. And I love this song to close out the film, Al Jarreau's song, Never Explain Love. I think it's such a beautiful song. It's the right kind of song for this film. because we've talked in this film about love and hate. Raja Rahim talked about that. And I think this is a reassuring call from the now late Al Jarreau, but at the time, a reassuring call for love, that we need love. Never explain it. It's complicated, but it's really beautiful and it's empowering. And that's what he talks about. Let the experience take over you. Never explain love. Just, enjoy and be thankful enough that you have the capacity to love. And I just love that it's kind of like this soothing reassurance that love will win after all, despite what we've seen in large parts of this film, and especially the last 20 minutes or so of it, that love will win. But the question becomes, will justice emerge? Will that ever win? And for us, that is not something that happens, right? Justice has not been our friend at all. There's no such thing as that for us in this country, not for black folk. There may be some moments here and there where that happens, and we've seen it over the years with a few moments of accountability. But for the vast majority of times, that just has not been the story for black people in the United States. I love these credits. They just float as Al Jarreau's song continues on. It's such a beautiful song, Never Explain Love, which is on the soundtrack for Do the Right Thing, the musical soundtrack, the soundtrack for the songs. I love it. I really love this song very much. One of my favorite end credit songs in any movie. It might be the best one ever. I really think that's true. Larry Cherry there, you see him, the hair person, the hairstylist, Larry Cherry. He's been the stylist on many, many movies, many of Spike's movies as well. So what do you think the right thing is? I ask you, what do you make of those two quotes? How do you weigh those two quotes? Which quote do you support? Do you support both of them? Do you support either of them? Do you support none of them? What do you think the right thing was? That's what I have to ask you as I close out this unofficial audio commentary, feature-length commentary for Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, an excellent film. What do you think the right thing is? I think that that's what Spike Lee leaves to you, and that's one of the great things about this film. It doesn't push you, it doesn't push an explicit solution. It pushes you as a moviegoer, as a film watcher, to come up with the conclusion, come up with the resolution yourself. You have to come up with the answers yourself, and that's the mark of a really good filmmaker, is someone who challenges you as an audience to think. We have such a Hollywood system where for so long now, Hollywood has given us things to easily digest and resolve. And we don't have to resolve them. They're resolved by the filmmaker and the writer. But the fact of the matter is, Do the Right Thing does not resolve anything. It leaves you thinking, right? It leaves you to guess, what is the solution here? Who did the right things? Who did the wrong things? Did anybody do anything wrong? Well, obviously there were people who did things wrong in this movie. The police, Sal, by smashing up the bass, smashing up the stereo. Raja Rahim had his music on very loud. I mean, there'll be people that say, well, he shouldn't have had his music on that loud. And listen, I won't disagree with that. But my point is, Raja Rahim should never have been killed in the first place. I don't care how loud his music was. There's a phone behind Sal during the scene. Could he have picked up that phone and called the police? Of course. The police are at his beck and call. They came in immediately when his pizzeria was being destroyed, right? So that's just a part of my take on it. But look, you have to think about this for yourself. How did you feel watching this film? There are people around the world who've seen Do the Right Thing, and now it has been for a long time now on the National Board of Registry. The National Library of Congress is one of the greatest films ever in history, and it really is. It didn't get that kind of respect from the Academy Awards at the time in 1990, but who cares what the Academy has to say about it? The fact of the matter is this film will endure long past films like Driving Miss Daisy. That doesn't even get talked about anymore, but Do the Right Thing always does. Decades later, centuries later. You have to figure out what the right thing is, and that's the point. Do the right thing. What is the right thing? We will talk about that forever. I have my views on it. I know you do too, hopefully. You can talk about them with people. And Spike Lee, thank you very much for this film. It's such an important film, and it resonates even today. It's still timely. It's timeless. Fight the power. And be well, everybody. Thank you very much for listening. I am Omar Moore. You've been listening to this feature-length audio commentary of Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing. Be well, be safe, and keep loving. And be an anti-racist.